to Candid Convos with Nurse E. I am Nurse E, and today I am here with Paige, a wonderful midwife that practices here. I wanted to say in the DMV, but primarily in Baltimore.
That's right.
Yeah, primarily in Baltimore. And she has agreed to come on and talk to you guys about her wonderful work that she is doing and how she is pushing for legislation to keep it going. So, you ready to jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So, first things first, you guys, let's define what a midwife is. So, I'm going to let you take it from there.
All right. So,
Okay.
a midwife is someone who supports somebody through pregnancy, labor, delivery, postpartum, also doing wellness checks in between, depending on your legislation.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, we'll hop into that. We'll hop into that. Okay, so what type of training do you need to be a midwife?
So there are a couple different types of midwives. I'm a certified professional midwife, and that is someone who's typically apprenticeship trained because we all practice outside of the hospital. CPMs. In Maryland, we're licensed direct entry midwives. Everyone has a different licensure. And CPMs is a national certification.
Okay, and CPM stands for?
Certified Professional Midwife.
Gotcha.
So that is where I took my boards and the type of midwife that I became before I started practicing in Maryland.
Okay.
And the training that I had was an apprenticeship underneath of a midwife for 3 years. So we're getting called to births at any hour of the night for 3 years, attending a certain number of births as an assistant, and then more as a primary midwife with the supervision of the midwife I'm apprenticing under. So we have to catch about 25 to 50 babies minimum before we get our licensure, our apprenticeship ends, and we get to sit for the board, take a test, get that national certification, and then apply for the licensure, pay the state of Maryland lots of money, and then we can practice here legally as licensed midwives.
Right. So what do you have to, I know it's an apprenticeship program, but do you have to go to any type of college?
Yeah, so I have an associate's degree in midwifery. So
Okay.
The other type of midwife is a certified nurse midwife, and they have an advanced practice nursing degree.
That's more familiar. That's what I'm familiar with. Okay. So a certified midwife, my understanding is you go to nursing school for 4 years, and then you do a 2-year program with a nurse practitioner midwife.
Right.
And then you take the state board exam, you get certified, and then you can practice as a midwife.
That's right.
But you cut out, I feel like it's kind of similar. I think it's just the way in which you're going about it just looks different.
And very different.
Okay.
Because I knew I wanted to practice out of hospital midwifery, I wanted to do this out of hospital training. Certified nurse midwives do not usually have any training with out of hospital delivery. So they're usually in a hospital or in a clinic. Some of them do birth centers, which can be considered out of hospital.
Got you.
But they're all very different. Most of the certified nurse midwives that practice out of hospital in Maryland come from the hospital, then leave, then come to home birth, and a lot of them don't have the experience that a brand new CPM would have right off the bat because they're relearning what it looks like without all the different support people you have in the hospital.
Right. So they can transfer out of the hospital and work in the same capacity in which you...
Sure, yeah. There are a few certified nurse midwives that do home birth here in Maryland, but only a few. Most of the CNMs that exist are in the hospital.
Got you. So that's the major difference. Your training is outside of the hospital, their training is inside of the hospital.
And so I did didactic work, that college degree, alongside of my apprenticeship.
Got you.
And I did learn all of the things that you would learn in your specific training to be a midwife, you know, postpartum, obviously, looking for complications, labor and delivery management, all those different things.
Right.
But also, all of my training was me and my apprenticeship, and that was it. One really big difference is that we care for newborns. In the hospital, when you are admitted for labor and delivery, the labor and delivery nurse, not the nurse midwife, is the one who's assessing the baby, assessing your vitals. And they're just kind of the nurse midwives, similar to OBs, are out of the room for most of the time, maybe checking in at what like the fetal monitor looks like, coming in every 4 hours to do a vaginal exam, but they're out of your hair. We do all of the labor and delivery support too as home birth midwives. We don't have usually anybody else.
Any other support.
We have a second person, but that person, we're more intimately involved in the entire labor process.
So when you're talking about being more intimately involved, what does that look like when a woman is in labor?
Well, for me and for nearly everyone who works in the out-of-hospital setting, we've already developed a relationship. I'm a solo practitioner. I'm not in a group practice. Very rarely are any of the midwives in Maryland, at least, in group practices. So you would be seeing the person you've seen your entire pregnancy on the day of your birth. And by the time I come to you, it's like we're family. You know, I say leave the door open, I walk in, I don't disturb your labor process. I do the same assessments. We do heart rate, you know, we do the baby, we do the mom, we do the blood pressure, and we get an idea of what you want, you know, for your birth. We've already discussed it and I already know you, so it's just a checking in. Vaginal exams are much more optional in an out-of-hospital setting if things are going normal. We're very connected with the physiological process of birth, so we can tell when things are headed in the right direction and when things might not be, and when it's a good idea to check internally. But not everybody wants that disruption to their birth process.
Because it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. I don't want to be messed with. Like,
you just need to do your thing.
I just need to do my thing.
So we try to be as unintrusive as possible. So if you're like, last night I went to a birth. I walked in, she was loud and going, and her husband was bailing water into the birth pool because the hose wasn't hooking up connected. Get your hose connected before your baby comes.
Get the hose connected.
So he's heating up water and putting it in the tub, and I'm like, listen, you go be with her. The tub is going to be great if we get there. If we don't get there, it's not the end of the world. And she's on the toilet. I was able to check her blood pressure on the toilet. I was able to listen to heart tones. I tried to get her up. That's where she wanted to be.
You
know, and if that's where you want to be, she was making great progress. So I got her all settled. And I walked out. We switched. We started bailing the water. Another thing a CNM in a hospital wouldn't be doing. So we're making sure the water temperature's right. I got her right in the pool right before she had her baby. It was a big effort on our part. But we want to try to fulfill your birth. If everything else is great, we get our assessments done, then we're just making sure that the space is what you want it to be. You know, dimming the lights behind you, reminding you of positions for labor progress, helping you through the hard part, but supporting you emotionally. And we're there the whole time once you're in active labor. I'm not caring for 4 or 5 different people in labor. I'm caring for you and just you. So if I step out of your space, it's because I'm going to your living room. It's not because I'm going to take care of somebody else. Ideally, now they are calling me all the time, but I'm with the person I'm with in labor.
So it sounds as though with a certified certified professional midwife, it's a very intimate setting. And it's kind of like, and I'm not trying to degrade or anything like that, but it's kind of like your mom. It's a loving person that's like with you, like your mom or your aunt. What you want. That's what you want. You know what I mean? And you also want, when you're in labor, to have the support of someone who's going to let you labor if you want to have a birth where they're non-surgical, you know, where it's not your provider is not promoting you to get a C-section or
pushing an epidural. They're really big on that in the hospital.
They're really big on that.
Over 90% of people in the hospital are birthing with an epidural.
And how do you feel? How do you know what to do if you have an epidural?
You just wait it out, I guess. And you will feel pressure of a baby when it's coming down. You usually can't avoid that, but the rest of it is just, you know, hopefully if your epidural works, which is a whole nother ball game.
That's a whole nother conversation, y'all. Like, we not even get ready to get into. But sometimes women have to be injected several times.
Or it just leans just a little bit to the wrong side. So one side's numb and one side's not. And of course that limits your movement too. So when you're at home, you're moving around. We're doing intermittent monitoring, which is evidence-based just as effective as continuous monitoring. So when we're listening to the baby every 30 minutes through contractions, tells us what the baby's doing, and then it gives you the space to be where you want, doing what you want.
Right.
We can listen to you when you're in the water, when you're in the shower, when you're on your tub, when you're on your hands and knees. We meet you where you are.
Right.
And we meet the babies where they are. So if you have your baby on the toilet, that's not as big of a deal at home. We're very comfortable. We've got very portable resuscitation equipment. In the hospital, it's like a big deal if you're not in your bed when you're delivering.
Right.
They may offer different positions in the bed, but they're pretty much concerned if you're on the floor next to your bed.
And
which is where a lot of people end up giving birth at home.
Yeah, on the floor, bathroom floor. It don't matter what kind of floor. Kitchen floor, basement floor.
That's right.
Some type of floor.
Just named all the places somebody gave birth this year.
This is where it's get ready to happen, okay?
Sometimes you don't get a choice.
No, you don't get a choice. But I think the biggest choice is the environment in which you have it. I wanted to have my baby in the pool, or I wanted to have my baby over the toilet or in the shower or wherever. But it's like, at least I got to have my baby at home, and I get to enjoy and savor the moment and not have my baby rushed off or me rushed off or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean?
We're used to that. We have portable resuscitation equipment. So if your baby needs a little stimulation, or if you need medication for a hemorrhage, you don't really have to go anywhere or do anything. We bring it all to you and take care of it where you're at.
Right.
And we're used to not having very unpredictable birthing spaces. Everybody's house is different. Everybody's birth plan is different. So we just make ourselves very portable for everybody who's involved. And then, of course, we're used to taking care of babies, which is another thing that CNMs in the hospital setting are very unfamiliar with. They have pediatricians, NICUs, and baby nurses that take care of all of that, whereas we do the initial mom and baby assessments.
Right.
You'll see your midwife, you'll have your baby in the hospital, they'll put the baby on your chest, somebody else is standing at your shoulders ready to take care of the baby.
Right.
And then the midwife goes back to the perineum and delivering the placenta.
Right.
And once that's done, the midwife is, good job, you did great. And they're out the door, and then everybody else is continuing those assessments.
Right.
Whereas we're the ones that do the whole postpartum recovery and make sure that we do a newborn exam and everybody's healthy on both ends. The mom and baby dyad are connected as one with us.
Right. So why would someone pick you or pick a certified midwife? Why would they differentiate between the two? Why would someone want to work with you versus working with a certified midwife? Do you have an answer for that?
Maybe. So I think that when people are looking for an out-of-hospital delivery, it's all about who they bond with the most.
Right.
I've heard that certified nurse midwives can take a lot of that hospital vibe with them outside of the hospital. Shorter visits, not connecting with their clients, but not all of them. So some people are looking for that. Honestly, someone told me one time if they had to have hour prenatal visits, they wouldn't want to do it. Like, they want to go in and they want to be out, and they just need somebody to be there to take care of them and their baby.
Right.
So the right fit for them is way different. I'm not that person. I'm going to be talking to you for a long time about your whole life history.
Right.
We're going to be like sisters by the time that you have your baby.
Got you. So. We are definitely sisters.
we get like this, we get really intimate in my practice. So if that's what you're looking for, then you work with me.
Right.
I think the skill set across the board is probably very similar.
Exactly.
We're going to be pretty good at assessing medical complications when somebody should be in the hospital and when should be out of the hospital. Now, CPMs also have more restrictions. So the legislation is very restrictive for certified professional midwives. The history of us really only existed for 10 years. So when I was birthing my first child, my certified professional midwife was unlicensed.
Gotcha.
So she looked at me at the interview and said, I'm happy to be your midwife, but I might be in jail by the time you give birth, because she was illegal. And that was a real thing that was happening to midwives at that time, and why we were fighting so hard for legislation in the first place.
Right.
We're nationally certified as midwives, but the state of Maryland didn't recognize us.
Right.
So now that we're recognized, in order for that to happen, they made a huge list of things that we can do and can't do, and they put it not only under the regulatory body of the Board of Nursing, but also in the law, so that everything has to be changed legislatively, which is very unique for any particular practice.
Right.
Or practitioner, so to speak.
So why do you think that that's the case? Just because you're not practicing in the hospital?
I don't think that certified professional midwives, maybe even just people who specialize in home birth, are as respected. Putting us under the Board of Nursing to begin with was not the best place for us to be regulated. We might be one of 2 or 3 states in all of the United States that has their certified professional midwives regulated by a nursing board when we're not nurses. So that's different.
So
other states have a board of midwifery. There's no board of midwifery in the state of Maryland.
In general. So even for the midwives that are in the hospital or the certified professional midwives, there is no board of midwifery in Maryland at all.
That's right. So the certified nurse
Wow.
midwives are seen by the Board of Nursing. They thought it would make sense to put us there. We have actually argued to go to the Board of Physicians, where they see naturopathic doctors and other ancillary professionals that consider themselves practitioners. They're a little bit more on top of things. Mm-hmm. The Board of Nursing has came out in opposition of us recently too. They're not for any kind of amendments that we want to the bill. They don't truly understand the practicalities of what it's like to be an out-of-hospital midwife, and the questions that they ask us aren't necessarily, they come from a space of ignorance. Like they need to learn more about.
Yeah, there's no
how
curiosity
it's so
about
different,
it. Yeah.
you know, than a hospital setting. But that doesn't mean that it's bad or wrong or dangerous.
It's just different.
It's just different.
And it's okay.
And it's very effective, and people have babies at home and it works out just great. But it doesn't look like it looks in the hospital setting in many different ways.
And I don't think that that's a bad thing.
No.
No.
That's what people hire us for.
Exactly. They want a different ambiance. They want a different feel. And so that's what they experience with a certified professional midwife. So let me ask you this, and I'm not sure if you answered it or if I asked it another way. Everybody that is a certified professional midwife, do they have to have a nursing background?
No, they don't. I'm probably the only one that has a nursing background in all of Maryland.
So that's probably why you're thinking about, why are we under the nursing board?
Right. We're not nurses. I'm a nurse, but I let that go inactive because that doesn't serve me as a certified professional midwife.
So essentially what you're telling me is anybody can be a certified professional midwife if they go through the apprenticeship, pass the exam.
That's right. Doesn't matter
Even
what
if
your
they went
background
to
is.
school for Spanish.
We have a couple of midwives with different strange backgrounds. One is a sheet metal worker on the union, and went back to school and had her babies, went back to school, became a CPM.
Wow.
You know?
How do you find the information to even inquire about wanting to go to school for that? Because I don't feel like it's publicized.
Yeah, it's, less than, 2% of people in all the United States give birth at home. So it's a very unpopular, less popular choice. And in order to be a CPM, certified professional midwife who would attend births at home, you go through NARM. So people would look for the North American Registry of Midwives, NARM, NARM. That's where I got my certification. That's where you sit and take your exam. And they have the various ways to get your credits to take the exam. So
Gotcha.
The apprenticeship model is outlined on there. Some people do go without didactic, where they do independent study that they turn into the midwife that they train under, complete apprenticeship model. And then the other model is going to a MEEC accredited school, as I did, which they would also list, and then fulfill your requirements through them and sit for the NARM. But all of that is on their website.
And I feel like if I could compare you guys to a medical component, it would be physician assistants. Because which they're, I think they're under the board of physicians.
Right, yes, that's exactly.
But
one of our CPMs was a physician's assistant before she became a CPM, and she's the one who gave us the idea to try to move to the board of physicians, because you know, the board of nursing's not on top of it. And she was talking about how the board of physicians is always really on top of it, which can be very helpful for
you guys,
for us to try to make changes.
Well, because to be a physician assistant, you don't have to have any type of medical background. You just have to get into physician assistant school.
Right.
And then they do all the training there. You know what I mean? In being a nurse practitioner, I can't even imagine like the steps you guys have taken, because it's, you go to nursing school, after nursing school, you go to nurse practitioner, like everything with nursing.
All outlined for you.
It's all outlined for you.
Well, and I think that's why you get, why this is so different and so confusing for the board of nursing, or confusing for people who are outside of this realm, because it's not boxed in. You want our practice guidelines, but our practice guidelines are a little, they allow room for individuals to make the choices for themselves.
Right.
You know, we have hard, firm boundaries about what's safe at home and what's not. But if I talk to you about your lab work and you don't want to do a specific test, it's not going to risk you out of care with me. We're going to have a conversation about why we offer it, what the benefit of doing it is, you know, what you may think the risks are, and what your concerns are, and what's best for your family.
Now, leading into that, what does the best candidate for you to work with, what do they look like?
Well, they're usually low risk, low risk moms, but that can mean a lot of things. A lot of people are told that they're high risk in the hospital.
Okay.
Just because you're an older mother, or you've struggled with infertility, or you've had IVF, those are things that make you high risk in the hospital setting, but wouldn't risk you out of home birth with me.
Right.
Those things are things that might require extra monitoring, have my ears perked for certain things, my eyes open, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't have a beautiful low-risk pregnancy and delivery. So we're looking to make sure you don't have high blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure before your pregnancy, that would be high risk. And then if you don't develop it in pregnancy, we're doing all the assessments to make sure that your baby is growing and that everybody's healthy. And if you don't have a complicated medical history, you're probably a good candidate for home birth.
So no chronic diseases like
That's right.
Diabetes or COPD, emphysema, any type of liver issues, transplant patients.
Maybe. That hasn't come up for me yet.
That hasn't come up. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
And when somebody comes to me and they say, I've had this history, we look into it and see if it would really affect anything, and make that decision on what would be safe and what's not.
So once you have the ideal candidate and they decide that they want to work with you, what can cause what could sever the relationship?
Well, by sever, do you mean kind of risk them out of home birth?
Yes.
Usually a medical condition coming up. So if you go into labor too early, if you develop high blood pressure, which tends to happen at the end of pregnancy, unrelated to an otherwise healthy pregnancy in person. If you have some liver problems that can come up if pregnancy's hard on your liver.
Right.
If you don't go into labor before 42 weeks, we have a little window that we would attend your birth in. If your water were to be broken for a very long time and the risk of infection goes up and your body doesn't go into labor.
Gotcha.
We start with making sure that you're staying on the highway. And if we start seeing you kind of going off, we try to give you nutritional recommendations, supplementations, lifestyle choices that can kind of get you back, and we do everything you can. And if that doesn't work and your blood pressure is climbing or your baby's not growing, we need to have some extra medical. We want to make sure that you're safe and your baby is healthy. And some of these things, the answer is delivering the baby.
Yeah, early.
Yeah, or, like weighing the risks and the pros and the cons delivering your baby versus waiting for something to get worse.
Yeah. So I had another question, and that is, how do you feel about allowing a mom to go into labor before 40 weeks? So after 36 weeks, you can safely deliver your baby, no complications. For the baby.
Right.
Are you pro that, or do you want to wait until 40 weeks?
I'm pro whatever your body does. And
Okay.
just this week, I've had 2 moms go into labor at 37 weeks.
Okay.
Which is not my typical week. And one of them, her water broke and nothing happened for days. And she really wanted to stay at home. She tried all the things to try to get herself to go into labor. And after some very candid convos,
not with nursing, with
Paige.
Yes.
We made the decision to head into the hospital for encouragement of labor. And so we're talking Friday all the way to Monday. Nothing was going on, and we just can't wait.
So you couldn't give her anything to...
Well, I'm not going to give you a Pitocin induction.
No, but what about the Cytotec or something?
I wouldn't induce somebody with Cytotec at home either. That comes with its own complications. But, we could do now. We did some natural things. Breast pumps produces oxytocin.
Okay.
So we did a lot of pumping.
Okay.
Herbal remedies, castor oil, acupuncture, Reiki, you name it, this lady tried it all.
To get to going.
And just didn't take off the landing strip.
Now,
sometimes that's because the body's not ready. The baby's not ready. Your water can break without your body being ready to go into labor.
But once the water breaks, then what? Because you were saying that she's at risk now for an infection.
The risk of infection for mom goes up at 24 hours. The risk of infection for baby can be somewhere between 48 to 96. I have that conversation with moms. A lot of them do try to go in to the hospital for induction if things aren't picking up by 48 hours. Some of them really want a home birth and they push it a little longer. And we just keep checking on mom and baby. But the likelihood of you going into labor really goes down the longer you wait. Most people 90+% of people go into labor within 48 hours if you're going to after your water breaks. And so once those waters are open, we go over all the things that increase the risk, vaginal exams, nothing in the vagina, of course. And we're talking about, monitoring their blood, their temperature and sending them in for labs for their white blood cell count, doing all we can. But the truth of the matter is once you start seeing signs of infection, it's too late. You want to get ahead of the game.
Yeah.
So we have a candid convo with midwife Paige and make the best decision depending on what's going on.
So did she end up having her baby
in the hospital?
Okay.
But on Monday.
How does she feel about that?
It's never a great thing to have to change your birth plan.
Right.
And there's always hoops that you have to jump through when you're in the hospital, whether or not things go smoothly or not. There's different staff members and different things, and some people are very understanding of your birth plan and some people struggle.
Right. I don't get that. I mean, you got to plan. And the way that you're describing a certified midwife in the hospital, it's not like they're there anyway.
Right.
So
it's really dependent on so many different staff members.
Okay.
It really is.
We
and then
won't
once
go
you
down.
make it through the labor and delivery, then you're on the postpartum unit,
Yeah.
If you have to deal with the NICU, there's so many different nurses and providers and just to get in and out of the hospital. And it can be beautiful. And I try to tell my clients that if their birth plan changes, it can be beautiful in the hospital.
Right.
But, that's most people come to me with the idea that that's not where they want to be.
Yeah.
And then the other client at 37 weeks had her baby in a couple of hours, pushed 3 times for her first time. I couldn't believe it. So it can be one way or the other.
It just depends.
And her baby is thriving and doing great,
Right.
Born at home just yesterday.
Just yesterday. I mean, I am definitely pro certified professional midwife. Definitely pro. But I do understand the medical side as well.
There's a necessity for it.
Yeah. There's a necessity for both. And I hate the, I don't even know the word. I hate the circus act that you have to go through just to practice. The end goal is still the same. Have a healthy mom, have a healthy baby. What is the issue?
Right.
So do you want to talk about the bill that...
Sure.
Yes.
So it's been 10 years since certified professional midwives received their licensing in Maryland. And here in Maryland, we're licensed direct entry midwives. So it's the licensed direct entry midwife bill where we're going in and trying to clean up a little things that are very we've been practicing for 10 years and these things that are written in the bill don't apply to us or are written in a way that aren't necessarily helpful. A couple of things on there that have shown up: contacting a pediatrician multiple times before we're done with our initial newborn care. Like I mentioned, we do most of the newborn care, which is different than other midwives and nurses. So I understand why the Board of Nursing would want this regulation, or why the ACOG wouldn't understand why we would want to change it. But we are the providers of the newborn in our current legislation for 72 hours. Under my training with the nation, I'm good for 6 weeks to care for a newborn. But the state of Maryland says 72 hours.
Wow.
But even though it says 72 hours, I'm supposed to call a pediatrician or notify them when you're in labor.
Right.
Which we know from those two stories could be 4 or 5 days, could be 2 hours. Would never have been able to call or notify a pediatrician the morning of that very fast labor. I was very busy. And the one whose water broke and was in labor for days, who knows when she would have given birth, and the pediatrician would have been, lost that fax, forgotten about it, or hanging on my whim for no reason. So contacting them in labor doesn't make sense, and we want to take that out.
Right.
We also are supposed to contact them at 24 hours, which also doesn't make sense. We'd like to take it out. Meeting a lot of resistance from that. So
ideally, what would you like it to look like?
Well, when I'm done caring for your newborn at 72 hours, I send all the pediatricians your records, all of the assessments I've done, the newborn exam, the follow-up weight, so we know what the baby was born and how they're feeding and weighing in a couple of days when I check on them. I can send all that information in a bundle when I'm done the care and I'm transferring over to the pediatrician. That's what makes sense. But the licensure wants us to have a lot of accountability. They just want to make sure that we're checking in with a real-life pediatrician. The truth of the matter is, if the baby is born and needs assistance immediately after delivery, your at-home pediatrician or a private practice pediatrician doesn't want to see your newborn. We'll be going to the NICU or to the hospital.
Right.
So it's not helpful. It's not a helpful legislation. But to the people who are writing the legislation, makes sense. Why wouldn't you want to tell a pediatrician about the baby 10 times in the first few days?
Right.
So that one just isn't practical, but it's in there. We'd like to tweak it.
Got you. Okay. Anything else?
A couple of things one of the biggest things that we've been wanting out of the bill since we got the bill was a BMI clause. And you may not know that this exists, but people who are under a certain weight or over a certain weight, according to their BMI, which is not the best evidence, we all know,
Right.
Restricts them from home birth. And that is like one of the number one reasons I have to tell somebody now. And it's unfortunate. We're in conversation and email. We see each other over a Zoom. Then they come in, we do an assessment, and I'm like, I'm sorry, you're just a little too fat. What kind of world is that? Of course, I don't say it like that.
No, but that's how it's interpreted. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And it's just, you don't have high blood pressure, you don't have diabetes, you don't have any chronic diseases. You're having a healthy pregnancy. You've probably given birth before and it was fine. You were treated bad in the hospital because of your weight, and you want to have a home birth.
Right.
And so we're hoping to move that, at least to consult. So we can talk to a doctor or nurse midwife. We can just consult with certified nurse midwives. And they can say, well, that sounds fine to me. And we can just say, okay. But right now, it completely risks them out.
Yeah.
And that is a significant population that would be someone seeking home birth care for.
Because if they end up in the hospital, they're the ideal candidate for a C-section.
Right.
Yeah.
And they end up being judged for no reason. Everything else can be great, but there's a lot of pressure to induce, a lot of pressure to have extra ultrasounds, a lot of lack of confidence in the bigger women. And, give me a larger woman compared to a smaller woman any day. Their constitution is much greater. They can handle a lot more, and they birth beautifully.
Yeah.
So you want your provider to have that perspective.
Right, exactly. That you can do it, we can help you do it, and it can be successful. So, okay, this bill was when?
It was heard a couple weeks ago, and they're currently in subcommittee discussing it right now.
So when should you guys get an answer?
Hopefully in the next week or so. Honestly, the Board of Nursing went back and said they didn't agree with literally everything in the bill. And we finally have come to agreement with other stakeholders, the American or the Maryland Hospital Association. It's a big weigh-in on our bill. They don't oppose home birth, but they are not fans of giving us any more leeway. And
That's the sister.
And then we have ACOG, who also has spoken with us many times. Once we kind of explain things like the pediatrician and the BMI, they're like, well, it's not like you're asking for the world. You're asking to do the proper risk assessments that providers should be allowed to do. Right. I would like to take it all out, you know.
Right.
If I had my way, we would have a one-page bill that would say Certified Professional Midwives, licensed direct entry midwives in Maryland are independent practitioners and can make their own assessments about who is safe at home and who is not, because that's what we're trained to do. Blank. You don't need to tell me who risks out of my care. I can figure that out for myself.
They're taking the thinking portion out for you as the provider.
Right.
Yeah. Because of how they look at how you're licensed and where you practice.
Right.
And
they just don't think that we're competent because
you don't practice in a hospital.
Existed in the last 10 years according to the law. But that doesn't mean that we haven't been doing this for years. 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. The dawn of time.
The dawn of time. Before there was a hospital. Where were women having their babies?
That's right.
So, in closing, let me ask another question. What keeps you motivated to keep doing what you're doing when met by so much resistance?
Well, the resistance, sometimes that motivates me.
Okay.
But, you know, like keep trying. But having my own children, being supported by a home birth midwife, having had my own experience transferring to a hospital with my first when I hired my midwife before I was pregnant, knowing I wanted a home birth, and seeing the contrast of mothers who are surrounded by love and support with someone who understands them, who's there just as we're lifeguards. We don't assume anything's going to go wrong. We're prepared for it, but we let you do birth. We let you do your thing.
Which you've naturally been created to do.
Right. And you get your own hormones and your own adrenaline and your own bonding with your baby. And we're there just to hold space. I don't need to touch your baby if your baby is curled up and crying. I don't need to know what the baby's respiratory rate is if I can see them breathing and crying.
Right.
You know, I can feel the pulse on the cord, but I can also see the life in their face.
Right.
You know, and that moment is yours to have, and your only moment as a mother, you know, to meet your baby for the very first time. And fathers, partners, anyone who's involved should be in their own space, a bubble. And I don't consider myself someone who should be in that space.
Right.
I only jump in if I need to be. And that experience and watching how that bond grows and how hard it is for us to say goodbye at our 6-week visits, the relationships I build with these women and with their babies and their families, it's just so motivating.
It is.
It is. I'm giving space for people to become the mothers and the families that they're meant to be.
Yeah, that's so good.
It's beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You have given so much clarity, just even like, although I've worked with you, like there were some things that I didn't know, and in this conversation I've learned more about that. So I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I know that my viewers and my listeners will appreciate this conversation. And as I end every show, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. There is a purpose that is attached to you, and my hope and prayer is that through this interview you get to experience that and see it and go and do it in a different way. So until the next time, I will see you on the next episode.